Okay. Let's go. You wanna win? Let's go. Hey, how it goes? Get ready, let's go. Go hard or go home. 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 They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. Don't let them stop you. Back against the wall, beat.
All right, welcome to the first ever live edition of the Shaemac Show with my very special guest. I am kicking this off with Mr. JC Allen from Bucks Game Day. JC, how are you doing on this last minute notice?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Happy that I'm the first guest on the first live episode of the Shaemac Show. I'm very honored. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, we had to do this special because we've never been live before. And I've been getting a lot of requests saying, hey, why don't you go live? Do this, do that, etc. Blah, 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 blah. So let's just do this. All right. So basically, we kick off episodes all the time, allowing our guests more to introduce themselves, give more of a background on them to a lot of people who don't know, and go from there. So overall, where did this all start from you, as in your background in sports and stuff like that?
So it's actually a crazy story. So I never I don't have any experience. I never went to school for it. I never went, really imagined me doing this. It all happened. I'm from New England originally, big Patriots fan, watched Tom Brady in the Pats for, 20 years of his career. I moved down to Tampa, Florida the year before Brady came down. When Brady came down the next year, I was looking for anyone talking about Tom Brady to the Bucks. Again, it was COVID, so a lot of things were shut down, but there wasn't a lot of people talking about it. So I stumbled upon this podcast, which took live phone calls, like a radio show, podcast, TV show, kind of hybrid. And I called in. I was like, "Oh, you guys are gonna love Tom." And then Gronk got traded, and then you guys are gonna love Gronk. Here's what they can bring to the offense. Here's what they can do. Here's how they'll help elevate the team, elevate the everything around them. And they really liked what I was giving and what I was talking about when I was calling in, and they asked me to come on as a guest. Well, that parlayed into a writing job, which I had no experience other than some college papers back, years ago. And then it led to my own podcast. It led to me moving on to another outlet down here, Pewter Report, which is one of the premier outlets down here. And then the last 2 years, this is my second season with Sports Illustrated, covering the Bucks now too. So it kind of just came out of nowhere, and every day I'm thankful. Every day it's still so surreal that I get to cover an NFL team professionally, be in the locker room, be in the games, and have NFL player contacts in my phone, talk to Mike Evans, play Fortnite with him, crazy stuff that kind of I never would have imagined, but kind of just fell into it and just kind of built myself up along the way into one of the, I would say, premier voices down here in Tampa.
Yeah. And you say you're from New England and you grew up watching the Patriots. So how did you feel when you first heard that Tom Brady was leaving the Pats after, I believe it was about, a good 18, 20 years about that, and then going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who ironically you are covering?
So as a person living in Tampa, I was, if anywhere, come to Tampa. Tickets were dirt cheap at that time. I was very excited. So I wasn't covering the Bucks yet. So I started pretty much because of Tom Brady. And it's funny, he was in Tampa for the Eagles game. I got to talk to him and kind of thank him for inadvertently setting me off on this journey by him coming down here, which is cool. But it's funny too, because in January, he signed with the Bucks in March. In January, I wrote on my Facebook page back before I was really on Twitter about how if Brady's going to go anywhere, Tampa makes a lot of sense when you start to add in all the factors. And my friends blasted me. They said he's going to Miami, he's going to the Chargers, he's going here, there, everywhere else. And then so that redemption a couple months later, I was like, I told you so. But I was fine with it. I thought the course had run its due with New England. So if he's going to be anywhere, why not in my new own backyard here in Tampa? And again, it's led to things I would have never imagined. So always appreciative of Tom Brady for his time in New England and certainly his time in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and acquiring, you went from Tom Brady to now this guy.
Yes.
So, how do you think that transition was from Tom Brady, who is the greatest quarterback of all time, arguably, if not indefinitely, the greatest player? That's why he's called the GOAT.
Yeah.
To now Baker Mayfield, who has shown that he is more than capable of possibly putting you in the best position possible to take you to the promised land.
Yeah, I think Baker said it best, and I think the Bucks said it best when they brought him in. No one's replacing Tom Brady. No one is ever going to replace Tom Brady and what he can do as a football player, as an icon, as um, just someone, a status who can bring so much to a franchise and a town and a city. And he brought a Super Bowl in his first year. But he wasn't trying to replace Tom Brady. He's not trying to step into Tom's shoes. That wasn't his game. And Baker, because Tom was older, 43 years old, 45 when he retired. Baker's much younger. He's 28. So he's a little more relatable to the guys. He can go, he's not, Baker's popular, but he's not Tom Brady popular, so you can go down to Hat Tricks, the local bar down here, and grab a drink with the guys and do stuff with them outside of the facility. So, he brought his own swagger. Obviously, Baker was humbled a little bit. He's not the same guy doing commercials in the Cleveland Brown Stadium, after what he went through. But it was a perfect fit. And a lot of people were kind of down on it and everything like, I don't know. And I thought Baker would be a perfect fit. I was on the Baker train the minute they signed him. I thought he was a great fit for this organization, especially for the deal they got him on last year. Even the deal that he signed this year looks like a heck of a deal for 3 years, $100 million. And a lot of people forget that Baker went through a lot of struggles with Cleveland. He has had 8 different head coaches or 9 different offensive coordinators. There was no consistency for him. And again, this year he lost another offensive coordinator in Dave Canales with Liam Cohen coming in. But I think Baker is exactly what the Bucs needed after having a guy like Tom who demands perfection. Is a guy who, of course, he wants, things as perfectly, but is also going to be a little bit lighthearted, a little bit more relatable due to his age, and a guy who can go out and have fun and kind of, he's a trash talker. He's going to sling it around. And I think he was the perfect fit for what the Bucs needed post Tom Brady.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you because this is the thing. I don't think people understood. Okay, first of all, he won the Browns their only playoff game in Lord knows how long. Like we don't even have the count for it. How many years? And then on top of that, he was like they slander him because he was the number 1 overall pick when he came out of Oklahoma. But come on now, he was a no-brainer in my opinion. He was clearly the best option, putting the Browns in the best position to win. So, and ironically, he did. It's only one quarterback who can argue they had a better year or better days with the Browns than Baker Mayfield, and that's Joe Flacco. And he's no longer there either, but he didn't even win him a playoff game. Baker did. So you got to look at all of those things and then look at where he has the Bucs right now. So it's like, I just don't think that they gave Baker the fair shot. I just think Cleveland is just meant to be a toxic dump, especially with what I'm seeing with Sean Watson right now.
Yeah.
Once that dude in Houston, now we go to Cleveland, whole nother ball game. It was the same thing with like 30 quarterbacks before both of them. There's a reason why they keep having all these quarterbacks. It's because let's just call it like it is. They suck. And I'm glad that this Baker Mayfield era in Tampa Bay is happening because not only is he keeping y'all in contention, but in the process, he's exposing the flaws that not only did the Browns have around him, but they had above him as well.
Yeah. They don't call it the factory of sadness for no reason, When you look at it, you're right. He was the only quarterback to lead them to a playoff win in a very long time. Bernie Kosar, I think, was the last one to maybe get them to the playoffs. And remember, he had them winning that game. If the defense stopped Chad Henne on a scramble, they're going to the AFC Championship game. And we never know what kind of happens, because Patrick Mahomes was out. So the next year, he just tried to put too much on himself, playing injured, Odell Beckham Jr.'s father got involved, and that's where the whole shenanigans started.
It
And
got
then
ugly
they decided they want Deshaun Watson. They're reaping what they sow now. But yeah, I think Baker, he feels comfortable here. He's at home here. You know, I don't. We'll see if they can lead him to a Super Bowl. But right now, he's playing really good football. Outside of the 3 interception, 2 of them weren't really on his quarter against the Saints last week. I think he's put himself, and again, he's in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay market always gets overlooked. People don't talk about Tampa Bay. They only started talking about Mike Evans after he hit 10 straight seasons with 1,000 yards. They still don't
right.
talk about Levante David enough. They don't talk about Chris Godwin enough, even though he's leading the league in receptions and touchdowns right now. Then they're not going to talk about Baker enough. Although I think what he's done so far this season, the way he's won games, the way he's bounced back from losses in different ways, has put himself in the MVP conversation in the league. He leads the league in touchdowns, and he's been balling out. So, but he won't get enough attention. But I think Baker was a beautiful signing for the Bucs team. Looked at maybe a stopgap. Now I think you're looking at a guy who can be the franchise quarterback here for the next, throughout his contract, for the very least, but for the next several years after that as well.
Yeah, I gotta agree. And you know what? I'm actually excited for the Bucks because they are my pick to win your division. But we're gonna get a little too more of that on the show. Flip the script here. Speaking of the Bucks, we have to talk about this. So they're sitting on top, they're sitting tied for first right now in the NFC South division with the Falcons at 4-2. Obviously, the game in Atlanta did not go well in their favor as much as they thought. As they think they did lose in overtime to Atlanta after Kirk Cousins, another game-winning drive by him. But what can you take away from that game and the game versus the Saints as they continue to achieve the goal of becoming your back-to-back NFC South champions and winning your division for the 3rd or 4th season straight?
Yeah, it'd be the 4th season straight, and I think 5th straight playoff season if they can do it. I think what you look at throughout the season, not just the last 2 games, is the Bucs have won very different ways. They start out with a high-scoring offense up against the Washington Commanders. Then they get a really close, tight victory against Detroit up in Detroit. Then you see them get blown out by the Broncos, which is like, oh, what's happened there? Then they go and they blow out the Eagles, in a really good game there. And then they lose in overtime to the Falcons. Maybe there should have been a face mask call that should have prevented that from happening. I mean, that's something the refs have been absolutely terrible this year. And then they go and they put 51 points on the Saints. So, I think when you look at it, they've shown that they can win different ways. They've shown that they can lose different ways, whether a blowout or a close overtime game, heartbreaking overtime loss, bounce back from those losses and go ahead and continue to move forward. I asked the guys about this last week, and they said, both said, it shows their resiliency, how mature they are. Last year, they went through a slump where they lost 5 of 6 games in the middle of the season, and it really kind of almost derailed their entire season until they turned it around on the final stretch. But the guy said, we've got leaders. We've been there in that position before. This year, now, we know how to bounce back. We know what it takes to bounce back from those games. So we're not in this slump, and the resiliency that we need to have. So I think moving forward, they're still in a tough stretch. They've got the Ravens on Monday night coming up. Then they've got the Falcons at home. Then they follow that up with the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. And then they welcome the San Francisco 49ers at home before they hit their bye week in Week 11. So it's a tough stretch right here. It eases up after their bye. But this is where you're really going to kind of show, okay, we can prove that we're among the NFC's best, if not the NFL's best. And I think they are. I had them for this season, finishing 11-6 on the season, and making it to the NFC Championship game. And so far, everything that I've seen from them hasn't swayed those predictions from me. They're 4-2. Let's say they split the next 2 games, and then they lose 2 games after that. I think 11-6 is a realistic possibility for this Bucs team. And the NFC Championship game certainly isn't out of the question. They've already shown they can beat one of the NFC's favorites in the Detroit Lions, another one in the Eagles if you think they're one of them. Let's see how they do up against the Falcons the next time they play them, and of course against the 49ers. And Cowboys might have been in that conversation. They had them later, but they're falling apart over there. So we'll just leave them out of that topic there.
Yeah, I'm kind of pissed that my Steelers had the nerve to lose to the Cowboys, but we're not even going to talk about that. I'm embarrassed. I'm not going to lie. I'm embarrassed that we lost to them, but we're not here for that. We're here for the Bucks. Okay, so translation back. So you spoke on that. You got Atlanta after this week, but before we get to the matchup in Atlanta, versus Atlanta, we got to talk about this matchup right here. As
Yeah, the Ravens, they're
here.
tough. They're tough. You look at them right now, the run game stands out when you look at the Ravens, and not just offensively, but defensively. Defensively, they're only allowing 59 yards rushing. Their front line, anchored by Justin Matabuke, has been terrific. That defensive line has really come on. They're really limiting players in the running game from doing anything and teams from getting anything started. On the flip side, they lead the league in rushing right now. Derrick Henry is a leading rusher in the NFL. He's got over 700 yards. But Lamar Jackson is still getting it done, too. He's got over 400 yards on the ground, too. And not just rushing as well, but Lamar Jackson has 1,500 yards passing, too. So 12 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So he's been very efficient, hasn't made a lot of mistakes, and has gotten the ball to his playmakers, mostly Zay Jones, with Mark Andrews up and down. Had a good game last week, and they'll try to lean on him. But I think when you look at this Ravens offense, they can beat you in a multitude of ways. First things first, if you're the Bucs, you got to stop or at least limit their ground game to an extent. Now, they have Vita Vea back after missing a couple of games. They finally got Kalijah Kancey and Antoine Winfield Jr. back last week, and you saw the difference it made immediately. They're going to count on those guys, and this is a KJ Britt game. KJ Britt is their linebacker paired next to Levante David. It's always going to be a Levante David game, but for KJ Britt, where he excels is that classic old school downhill, 2-down thumper linebacker. This is going to be his game because Derrick Henry is extremely hard to take down. So he's got to be able to show that he can bring Derrick Henry down when he tries to run up the middle and run towards him. So that's going to be a big game for him. I think if you're the Bucs on offense, the depth of target for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin has been career lows for both of them. With the Ravens secondary, you have to take those opportunities down the field because they've been awful guarding the deep pass. So you have to get those opportunities. And you got to hope Mike can play. He's dealing with a hamstring injury, missed this practice today. It looks like he's trending to play, but any setback during the week, and now you're down Mike Evans, and you really can't afford that to happen. So I think if you're the Bucs, you got to take your shots downfield on offense. Try to establish a run game, even though it's going to be difficult. You got that two-headed, potentially three-headed monster. Use the screen games like you have as an extension of the run game if you can't get the ground game fully going. And you got to stop the run and contain Lamar Jackson. You do that, you try to make him beat you with Zay Jones, Isaiah Likely, Rashad Bateman, and Mark Andrews. I think you've got a good shot at winning. I think this game before the season, a lot of people would have looked at it and said, oh, that's a big loss for the Bucs. I think people are starting to kind of wake up and realize this Bucs team is for real. And this will be a lot more of an interesting, a lot closer game than when you looked at it in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be having my popcorn Monday night watching that game. It's gonna be a hell of a game. But before I let you go, obviously we didn't get to all that I wanted to, but we're gonna get to this because we spoke on this.
Yeah.
We touched on this. As I said, you were my pick to win this division. So obviously, I think you can agree when we say we're gonna rank our teams right now. I got the Bucs, Falcons, Saints, or you can switch, a healthy Saints and Falcons team. And then obviously you have to put the Panthers last. So speaking of all of this, all the expectations, all the hype in Atlanta, New Orleans is falling apart a little due to injury bug. And then you got Carolina that's just a complete mess. So who is your honest pick to win the NFC South division?
Yeah, it was the Bucs at the beginning of the season. It's the Bucs still now. I think, when you looked at that game against Atlanta, you're in Atlanta, hostile territory. It was Matt Ryan Ring of Honor night too. Like the fans showed up, they were loud. There was a lot going on in there. There was a few missed penalties that the refs missed. Surprise, surprise! They've been missing penalties and throwing flags like crazy. But the
You
face
feel
mask,
your pain week one. That was us week one.
yeah, I mean, there was a face mask they missed that would have ended the game. The Bucks would have won. I think they learned from that, though. That's the biggest thing I talked about when they're these games that they've won, these games that they lost. They've learned from these games and they can apply it going forward. So I think the Bucks win the NFC South. I think they get their revenge next week when they come in for the creamsicle game. I had them winning that game before the season. I think I'm right there with you, ranking those teams too. You know, Saints, I had kind of fallen apart with Dennis Allen maybe getting canned sometime during the season. Now with the injuries, Rashid Shaheed's out, you know, for their year. They're banged up. Chris Olave is already ruled out with a concussion, not playing tonight actually because they're playing right now. Derek Carr's out. Alvin Kamara's banged up, but he's playing through stuff. I think they're there. And I do like the prospects of a Dave Canales-led Panthers if David Tepper gives him the leash. That's something we haven't seen before. I think they're a couple years away from really kind of being good. I think we've seen improvement already this year from what we saw last year, but they're still the bottom of the basement right now until they get enough talent on. That's the thing. They don't have enough talent on there. They got a number 1 pick, probably a top 5 pick to add to that this season, and we'll see what they can do as the years go on under Canales' leadership. But right now they're bottom basement. So I'm there right there with you. I think the Bucks win this division. I think they probably end up the number 2 or number 3 seed in the NFC playoff bracket. And again, like I said, make it to the NFC Championship game. And what happens there, who knows?
Yeah, who definitely knows. And with all this going on in San Francisco, inconsistency from Seattle, then you have the rest of the NFC West division that's just not there just yet. And then the rest of the NFC, Eagles up and down. They already basically dominated the Eagles, so they showed you they could beat them. Yeah. It's hard to argue that the Bucks cannot be, you know, it's hard to argue that they probably could. They probably could win the conference. So, and I think that the one thing I like about your schedule is that game, you know, these games will, expose whether or not they're ready for that. And I think with this loaded roster, that receiving core, that run game that's underrated, your defense is one of the league's best when healthy, especially your pass rush. And with Baker Mayfield, his ability to move, to throw the football down the field, I just think that this can be a real dangerous team, not only for the NFC and of course the NFC South, but for the entire NFL.
Yeah, you know, Baker Magic is real. And after the bye, they have the Raiders, they have the Panthers twice, they have the Chargers, they have the Saints again, and they also have the Cowboys team, which who knows what that's going to look like, you know, the latter half of the season, but they've got a very winnable stretch down there. If they can, like I said, if they can get through this next 4-game stretch 2-2 at the very least, they're in good position to have a really good record and build momentum going into the playoffs. So,
yep, I definitely agree. So before I let you go, is there anything else we should expect from Bucks Game Day as the 2024 season coming on? Any new content, any new things being added?
Oh, yeah, there's tons of stuff going on. You can always follow me here on Twitter at JCAllenNFL. I've put out all of our work there. We're one-stop shop for anything Bucks. So if you're interested in following the Bucks this season, look no further than there. SI Bucks Game Day, we're pumping out so much content. We've got weekly pieces, quote pieces, insider opinion pieces, all sorts of stuff like that. We've got so much stuff going on. We got a podcast here, The Cannons. It's on every Wednesday. I've got my own podcast, The Pirate Parlay. That's on every Wednesday. Soon we'll be shifting to Tuesdays and Thursdays. Right now, Wednesdays and Fridays. So lots of stuff going on. Follow me for all of it. I got you guys covered. Anything Bucks, I'm your guy.
All right. Yep. You know what? I'm definitely am. I'm already following you. And just in case you can't find the Bucks Game Day profile on Twitter, you can follow this man right here at JC Allen NFL, as he will give you the latest and the hottest going on in Tampa Bay. JC, that's all I have for you. Thank you for joining. And well, let's just hope that the Bucks can pull it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
I want to be great. I want to go to my plate. To be the best, you gotta go hard and do whatever it takes. I want to be great. I learned from my mistakes. Now I do what it takes. I do what it takes. I do what it takes. Everyone's had that day where you want to throw it all away. Setbacks going back to back. back to back. Going up the only way to skate. Don't listen what the haters gotta say. After the win, look 'em in the face. Success is sweet, sweet, sweet. And I really, really let it taste. The hunger, it keeps me alive. I want the piece of the pie. Give me the plate. I want to go to my...
And welcome back to the live edition of the Shaemac Show. I am kicking off this episode once again with my very special guest from SB Nation, senior WNBA writer, Miss Noah Dalzell. Noah, how are you doing today? Did I get your name right?
You did, yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm here in Minneapolis, covered the WNBA finals, and it's been a hell of a series, so I can't complain.
Honestly, it's been a banger. It's been back to back, back to back, back to back. The Lynx, we've looked at this team for years. I mean, for years, saying at least 2-3 years now, saying this team could be a juggernaut. This team could be dangerous. If this team gets their act together, we could be talking about them. And here we are. They're neck and neck with the Liberty. Obviously, the Liberty is leading that series. So before we really get into game two, let's just talk about game one. We'll get into game three. Let's talk about games 1 and games 2. So what were your overall thoughts on those games and how you think that can impact the series moving forward along with game 3?
Yeah, so game 1, I was at Barclays Center, and I would say it was one of the greatest basketball games I've ever watched, but New York was leading by double figures almost the entirety of the game. And actually the first time that Minnesota took a lead was when Courtney Williams hit a 3-point shot with the clock winding down and was fouled on it. And so that gave the Lynx their first lead of the game. That game ended up going into overtime after Brianna Stewart won 1 of 2 from the line, and the Lynx won that game in overtime. And so what was fascinating about that game is that it was like almost so emotional for Minnesota that I think in a way it like makes it hard to bounce back from like a win like that as well. It's hard to bounce back from the loss, but it's also like the adrenaline is running high. It was kind of miraculous that they were able to pull out that win. And then they come out in game 2 and they fall down by double digits early on again. And this time they don't have enough to come all the way back against New York. So now the series is tied heading back to Minneapolis. And, it's a best of 5 series. So game 3 is really the one where someone's going to take control of the series and put themselves in position to actually close things out. And obviously New York got it done last night. But I felt like through the first 2 games, what was noteworthy was that the Liberty was actually outplaying the Lynx almost the entirety of both games. Yet both games went down to the wire and it was a 1-1 series. So these fast starts that were really hurting Minnesota were very obvious and very kind of difficult for Minnesota to overcome. And then last night we saw something very different, a completely different kind of game flow. And so, yeah, it was just been a very back and forth kind of series with just so many of the game's greatest players as well that I'm just grateful to be able to be a part of it and covering and witnessing everything.
Yeah, it's a great thing to cover. And you know what? Obviously, we all got to represent the W because they are not getting talked about enough again. But record-breaking, finals where they averaged at least 1 million views per game so far this year. And then I'm pretty sure with Sabrina Ionescu, her game-winning 3, that girl is something. That girl is definitely something. But you know what? I did not think the Lynx will win a game in Barclays. I did not see that coming. I'm not going to lie. They shocked me. I said, what? The Liberty lost at home to the Lynx? But, this is a team that is better than a lot of people gave them credit for. So we flipped the script here a little bit because we talk about games 1 and games 2, and clearly it impacted game 3. The Liberty was like, you know what? Nah, they beat us in our home turf game 1. We got to get even and take the lead in this series, which they did. Hence the reason why they're now leading 2-1. So with that being said, how do you think that can impact game 4?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting about game 3 is that Minnesota played really well, especially defensively. Nafisa Collier said today it was our best defensive effort of the series. And so really the question becomes like, can you do everything you did right in game 3, except make more shots? And not to dumb it down, but that's really what they were saying post game. And then again today, it's like at the end of the day, like basketball is a game of, you have to score baskets. And yesterday they didn't score enough baskets down the stretch. Cheryl Reeve did talk about how with the Liberty's rim protection, with Breonna Stewart as a 7'1" wingspan, and Jonquel Jones, like you really do have to be mindful when you're driving to the basket to not take difficult shots that are, contested by these very great defenders. And so I think they want to replicate the defensive effort. They're going to need to see players like Bridget Carlton and Kayla McBride, who were big in last game, continue their good play. But you need Nafisa Collier and Courtney Williams to show up and to show up as efficient as possible. And they both struggled in this game. And obviously they're both instrumental to what this team does. But I think you're going to need all the pieces. And, they have to shoot individually better. But everything else has to be the same. And what concerns me from the LYNX standpoint is that I think that the Liberty still have another gear they can get to. And so if the LYNX come out the same, the Liberty can come out better than they did last game. So they're going to have to be pretty effective across the board here to tie things up.
Yeah. Liberty it's hard to beat that team, whether you're on the road or whether you're at home. And them knocking off the Aces was more than just a milestone for them, because that's who took the WNBA Finals champion dreams from them last year. So it's like now I feel with the Aces being knocked out by them, it puts more pressure on the Liberty to come through, because people would say this is an inexperienced Minnesota Lynx team who just beat the Connecticut Sun, who was the other favorites, like at least top 3, top 4 of the favorites to win it all this year, to get to there. And then here are you, who was the second favorites heading into the year. Obviously, the Aces were the first because they were the defending champions back-to-back. Everyone was hoping, or at least half of the WNBA fan base was hoping for them to win the three-peat, because none of us witnessed that. None of us who was, other than those who was alive to witness the Houston Comets, were the only ones who witnessed that, a three-peat in the WNBA. So that's why everyone was hopeful. Liberty had other plans. So as game 4 is tomorrow, what do you think, how much pressure do you think is on the Liberty to get it done, to win it all, and take the prize?
Yeah, so I think the pressure is on the LYNX the most because they are facing elimination ultimately. And I think as much as New York wants to close this out tomorrow, I just covered the Celtics championship run. And sometimes with these closeout games, you don't want to put all the pressure in the world on a game that you don't have to win, because I think sometimes you come out almost wanting it too much. And in turn, you play a little tight and you make uncharacteristic mistakes. And so the pressure is still, in my opinion, more on the LYNX. But I know New York has been here before. Last year's finals kind of reverberate, they're very much front of mind for this team, the outcome of that series. And so I think they just know that they don't want to get ahead of things. Like I asked Sabrina today about the shot, and she said, asked her like, when did she realize it was like an all-time great shot? And she was kind of like, it's not an all-time great shot unless we win the series. And so I think they're very much mindful of that.
Yeah. And Breonna Stewart, obviously, this is nothing new to her, because people seem to forget she is a former WNBA Finals champion in her own right. Obviously, she won, at least, I'm not mistaken, 2-3 world titles with Sue Bird with the Seattle Storm. So this is nothing new for her, but she obviously wants to create her own legacy, get out of Sue's shadow, because many people, for some reason, put her there, and wants to basically involve her own legacy and rebuild it with another team. Hence the reason why I think she departed from Seattle and went over to New York, where now she's with Sabrina Ionescu. She's with Courtney Vandersloot, who people seem to forget was on the Chicago Sky and was an X factor in that title run for Chicago. So with this being said, who do you think overall is your pick to win the WNBA Finals? So who are you picking? Like, who would be your pick to win the WNBA Finals and to win the MVP?
Yeah, so I think I have New York at this point winning the finals. Initially, actually, before the playoffs began, I had Minnesota winning the whole thing. And so I really do believe in this team. But the more I've watched New York play, the more I realize, like, am I kind of overlooking something that's not, I don't want to say inevitable, but a team that is been historically dominant all season. And so I think New York's going to get it done, whether it's in 4 games or 5. I'm really not sure. I'm kind of 50-50. I haven't figured out, as far as my travel goes, I'm like, do I book my train to New York from Boston, or because I live in Boston right now, I'm in Minneapolis, but so still not, I don't have a strong intuition on that one, but I do think they're going to get it done. As far as finals MVP go, it's tough. I actually hadn't thought about it until you brought it up earlier, but I think Breanna Stewart, just her two-way impact and just her impact in game 3, she was really the MVP of that game. 30 points, 11 rebounds. They're not even in position for Sabrina to make a go-ahead shot if it wasn't for the fact that Breanna Stewart, kind of put the team on her back for a long stretch of the game. So, yeah, I think I'd say Breanna Stewart is the MVP there. I mean, the other person that would come to mind is Sabrina, but I think she honestly hasn't had like the best series of her life, and it would take like a massive game 4, I think, for her to make a strong case here.
Yeah, agree. And you know what? I'm excited. I really hope this series goes to 5. We need a game 5. We need as much to squeeze in as much as WNBA basketball as possible, because I don't want the season to end. I love watching the women play. Like, people don't see, I think what it is, they don't think the women can hang. They don't think the women can go. But these girls can go. This finals is exposing that. It's so much talent on both sides, offensively, defensively. Pick your poison. If you're a defensive girl, you're a defensive guy. Like, if you like defense, watch the WNBA. If you like offense, watch the WNBA. If you like 3-pointers, watch the WNBA. These ladies have it all. It is nothing that you look for in the game of basketball that is not brought to the WNBA. And that's just the whole, that's just that with this. So it's like, are you hoping for this game to go to a game 5? Or do you just be like, you know what? We need to crown champions. I need to know who I'm interviewing. Let's just close it out game 4.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping for a game 5, honestly. I'm tired from all the travel, but I will say, I think the series deserves as much as possible. Like, this has already been a historically great series. Every game has gone down to the wire. Even game 2 was close with a few minutes to go. So I think we need 5 games of this matchup. We'd be getting robbed if not. So I think this LYNX crowd deserves to see a win on their home floor. And then also, I personally think just winning a championship at home is just so much more fulfilling, at least for the fans and for the city and everything. So it'd be cool to see the Liberty close it out in a game 5. I'm not rooting for either team, but I think if you're the Liberty, like, obviously you want to win as soon as possible. But in the scheme of things, if you end up doing it in 5 in front of your rowdy home crowd, that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? I'm a native New Jerseyan, so I'm pulling for the Liberty because I really do want to. I want to see Sabrina Ionescu win a ring. Low key, I'm a Sabrina Ionescu stan, but it would be pretty cool to see the LYNX win one. Even though I'm a Sparks fan, but it would be cool to see them win one, because from where they came from to where they are now, like, they lost a lot of legendary pieces to that team. So it's like, when you lose that and then you're back here, it's hard to root against a team like that. But then you got the Liberty, who has so much talent, and it's like, we can't let this go to waste. This era is great. This era is great. But overall, what would you say should be the expectations for game 4 as we just concluded game 3 of the WNBA finals? And what should the fans look out for?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I know I feel confident about is that this is going to be another down to the wire finish, because that's what we've come to see. These teams are pretty evenly matched, and neither team quits and neither team goes away. So I think we're expecting another close matchup. I think players like Napisa Collier and Breanna Stewart are both going to show up as effectively as possible and have big nights. And I think Courtney Williams is going to have a bounce back game as well, because she had a tough game 3 outing. She's a gamer. She showed us that earlier in the series and just throughout these playoffs. And so I think with the lights shining bright, like, she'll show out, she'll have a good game. So I think we're going to see really high level basketball, and there's going to be a hero at the end of the night. And whether it's a Liberty player or a LYNX player, I don't know yet. But certainly I think it's going to be another one of those down to the wire finishes. And Last night, the home crowd was pretty much stunned. Maybe this time they celebrate. Maybe it's once again now they're watching a team hoist the championship trophy on their floor. So lots of possibilities, but I think that both teams are going to be sharp. And we're going to see some big-time performances because we've seen that all year. These are some of the best players in the game. And yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And you know what? I'm definitely going to be on my couch and I'm definitely going to be watching that. My couch or my bed. Either way, WNBA Finals Game 4 is tomorrow on ESPN, 8 p.m. If you have not watched, please watch that because we're going to get another banger. We're going to get another thriller. Noah, that's all I have for you for right now. But before I go, is there any more content within SB Nation, within the WNBA that we should look out for, or anything for the NBA as that is around the corner as well?
Yeah, well, I cover the Celtics for SB Nation as well as the WNBA. I have a Celtics podcast called You Got Boston. So if you're interested in that, you're welcome to subscribe. But just WNBA coverage is at sbnation.com/WNBA. I'll have more stories coming out of today, tomorrow. I have a story on Unrivaled. I interviewed a bunch of players about Unrivaled and their participation in that. So lots of exciting stuff.
Yep. And you know what? Thank you so much. If you guys are not, please follow her on X, which is formerly known on, as Twitter, at Noah Dalzell, as she will continue to give you both the WNBA coverage representing SB Nation, along with coverage on your reigning defending NBA Finals champions, the Boston Celtics. Noah, thank you so much for joining, and well, have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Ready, get ready, let's go! Go hard, go home. Hard, go home. 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 They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. They can't stop you.
And welcome to the final session of the live edition of the Shaemac Show. This is the first ever live. Of course, I had to bring back a familiar face, Mr. Alan Saunders from PGH Sports Now. Alan, how are you doing on this last minute notice?
What's up, Shay? I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just glad to get this going. I'm glad, I've been pushing it back, so forth, but we're getting started because there's been a lot to look out for. So obviously you got a lot of teams that are juggernauts, but tonight is the night of Thursday night football. So before we get into week 7 and obviously the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is the ultimate reason why I brought you up here on the show, what should fans look out for in the preview of this tonight? Like, what would you say should be the ultimate, thing to look out for as the Saints will take on the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton's epic return to New Orleans?
Yeah, I mean, a couple interesting storylines there. You got Sean Payton go back to New Orleans. You got a couple of interesting rookie quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler going up against Bo Nix, a couple of guys that, I thought Rattler played pretty well. Got thrust in with the Derek Carr injury. Wasn't expected to play. I thought he played okay last week. See if that, he can get some run here and see if the Saints have something in him. Other than that, I mean, look, Thursday Night Football, a couple of not very good teams. I'll take any good storyline I can get, and that's 2 of them. And I think, the Saints were a team that kind of started out hot and have faded a little bit. I wonder, we saw the Bucs had an impressive game last week. Can they stay close in that NFC South? That feels like a division where at the end of the year, everybody's always very tightly bunched together. Will that be the case this year? Obviously, the Panthers seem like they're off the pace. Are the Saints going to be in it or not? I think we're starting to get to that time of the year where people are starting to separate the contenders from the pretenders, and I think the Saints are scrambling to find themselves on the right side of that line.
Yep, agree. And you know what? I think that this matchup is going to be a lot more interesting than people want to give it credit for, because these are 2 teams that people don't expect much from, especially as you already disclosed. The Saints are now going through an injury bug. They're losing Rashid for the rest of the season. You got Derek Carr, who's out for a couple of games. NFC South is pretty much between the Falcons and the Bucs. I'm going to pick the Bucs still to win that division. That's been my pick since day one. But Translation, how do you think this matchup can impact the AFC possibly, as the Denver Broncos is sitting at 2-3 and can possibly be 2-4 tonight or 3-3 tonight and tied with a couple of teams heading into week 7?
I have a hard time buying the Broncos as a real contender. I think they're actually better than I thought they would be. But if you're a Steelers fan, I mean, you should be rooting for Denver, right? I mean, that keeps making that win on the road look good. But I don't think it. I don't really. I just don't buy the Broncos as real contenders. I don't think Nix is good enough. As certainly not as a rookie, maybe not ever. And I don't think the rest of their team has enough around him to make up for, having a rookie quarterback. We'll see how it goes. But I think Sean Payton's going to try to run it up on the Saints, so that should be interesting too. I don't know that he has the horses to do it. Maybe they turn it over a bunch. I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting. I'm going to just have my popcorn and watch, and I'm going to just play for, pray, correct me, for a big Alvin Kamara game, because that's what I put my bet on. Don't say that. All right. Flipping the script here. NFL Week 7 is here. What should be something that you think the fans should look out for outside of the Steelers matchup versus the Jets, who just acquired Devontae Adams? What other matchup should Steeler Nation look out for as NFL Week 7 is here?
Well, we're finally getting another AFC North game. We've only had one so far. We'll get the second one this week as the Bengals play the Browns. The Browns are getting Nick Chubb back. This sort of feels like their last gasp of, if it doesn't work with Chubb, what's going to work for the Cleveland Browns? And the Bengals, they're good. They have good players. I can't figure out why they haven't been as good as everyone thought they would be. Sort of feels like a must-win game for both of these teams, as they're kind of stuck pretty far behind the Steelers and the Ravens in the AFC North. You can't really. I mean, the Bengals lose this game, they're 2-5. There's a chance the Steelers and the Ravens could both be 5-2 at the end of the week. That'd be devastating. So I think that's, if you're a Steelers fan, that's a big matchup. I'm not sure that's a big matchup the whole world is going to necessarily be tuned in for. The one I think the whole world is going to be tuned in for, at least in terms of Sunday 1:00 games. The Houston Texans at the Green Bay Packers. Man, if you like offensive football, I think this one's going to be for you. Talking about the opposite of this Thursday night game, two dudes who can really sling it, and C.J. Stroud, Jordan Love, a whole bunch of really good wide receivers on both sides, a couple of pretty good running backs as well. I think this is going to be a really, really good football game. Very often do I see a game on the schedule where I just, as an analyst, look at it and be like, I don't know who's going to win, but I can't wait to watch. And that's exactly what I'm thinking about the Texans and the Packers. So I think that's one. And then, of course, Steelers fans are always going to want to keep tabs on the Baltimore Ravens. They're the Monday night game against those Bucks.
I was just about to bring that up.
Last week, 50 points last week. That's a big game, and I think one I'm really interested to see as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna have my popcorn for that one, because to me that's a matchup that can go either way. Because if Derrick Henry gets going and the Ravens defense pick up where they left off last year, which is really hard to do due to Patrick Queen now being on the other side of the division, but that can be a real hard task for the Ravens, because Baker Mayfield has been playing extremely well this year. He has not been turning the ball over as much as people expect, even though he had 3 last game. But the Bucs is a juggernaut team. And in earlier session of this episode, I just had my guy JC Allen on the show, where he started breaking down how the Bucs can be dangerous, how they could possibly be a juggernaut to come out the NFC. They are my pick to win the NFC South, and I think that could be a game that the Ravens could lose. So as we head into week 7, QB controversy in Pittsburgh. Obviously, the Steelers got the Jets this Sunday, so they're going to have to handle their business, because this is a conference game, and you could possibly take first place in the division. Head into, your final matchup before you go into your bye, till you go into the toughest stretch out of the rest of the league for the remainder of the season. And that's when you play your division. That's when you got the Eagles, the Chiefs, all these other teams. So with this being said, and with all this controversy that is happening, who do you think should be or should have been given the starting spot and should be QB1 in Pittsburgh? Russell Wilson or Justin Fields?
Well, I think it's two different questions there. right? I agree with the idea to start Russell Wilson this week. Here's why. Justin Fields had 6 games to play as the team's starting quarterback while Wilson was injured. And while the Steelers were 4-2, it certainly was not because of his quarterback play. It was, 150 yards a game or something like that. Yes, he cut down the turnovers. Yes, he increased his completion percentage, but it just was not a dynamic passing offense. Steelers are 27th in passing as we sit here right now at the start of week 7. That's just not good enough. Now, is Russell Wilson going to be better? I don't know. But you have a quarterback who you looked at the two of them side by side all training camp. The Steelers decided that they thought Russell Wilson was better. Russell Wilson's probably a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's got great credentials. It doesn't do you any good to have him sit on the bench all year and then you find out later, oh, he really was that good. You got 2 games here before the bye. You got, maybe 1 or 2 after the bye to figure this out. And then, then you'll have a real answer. I don't think they're going to have a real answer who their quarterback 1 is until we see both of them in some kind of representative sample in some real regular season games. Justin Fields said it well himself today. He had a chance to make this not a question. He had 6 games where he could have gone out there, and if he played so well, the Steelers would have never considered bringing Russell Wilson back. He didn't play that well. He left the door open. And so now the Steelers are going to see what they have in Russell Wilson, and I think then they'll figure out who quarterback 1 is.
Yeah, and that brings me to comments that was made by former Steelers quarterback, future Hall of Famer Ben Roethlisberger on his podcast show, Footballin' with Ben, after the Steelers advanced to 4-2 on the season. He said, something as if, I'm just paraphrasing. At this point, I wouldn't even think about taking Justin Fields out of the game, which means he felt like Justin Fields has earned that starting spot. They shouldn't take him out the game. Obviously, the momentum can change. He just don't see it as a good idea. Do you think he had a point for when he said that? Or do you think that he should just wait it out like everyone else to, after this week and week 8 versus the Giants in order to make comments like that or similar?
Yeah, I mean, it's awkward timing when you have coming off a win where the offense scored more points than it has all season, and you're going to set down the starting quarterback. Yeah, it's definitely awkward timing. I just think the difficulty of the schedule at the end of the season, like remember the Steelers last year, they got into it at the end of the season. They gave Mitch Trubisky a couple games. Then they said, no, they're going to bench Mitch Trubisky. Even though Pickett was hurt, they went to Mason Rudolph, caught fire, won the last 3 games, make the playoffs. We've seen what the schedule is like the last 4 weeks of the season. We know that's not going to happen this year. They are at Philly, short week Baltimore, short week Kansas City, at Cincinnati. That could very well be 4 losses, even with a really good Steelers team. They can't wait that long. I don't think they have the luxury of letting things play out and seeing what happens with Fields. If they have something better in Wilson and they can stack a couple more wins in the intermediate time, they have to do it. And so I think it is awkward timing. There's no question about that. It's unusual timing, but I understand why they feel like they have to do it.
So, in other words, you agree with Mike Tomlin's decision of giving Russell Wilson a chance versus a not 1, but possibly 2 top 5, top 10 pass rushing teams coming into town within the New York Giants, week 8, the New York Jets this week with Aaron Rodgers throwing the football with his new wide receiver, old friend Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson. So we speaking on this matchup. What should Steeler Nation look out for? And how do you think what are the keys to the Steelers getting this done, getting the W with either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson in this game?
Well, it's going to be Russell Wilson in this game. I know the Steelers haven't announced it anything, but you can hang your hat on that. It is absolutely going to be Russell Wilson. How can the Steelers win? I think that on offense, they have to find a way to get this passing game going. I'm not sure this is the week to put it all on George Pickens with Sauce Gardner on the other side. I remember when Wilson was in there in the spring, I really saw him with a connection with Pat Freiermuth and Calvin Austin. And those guys have really seemed to be poised to elevate their game significantly. And then that never really happened while Justin Fields was in there. I think those are 2 guys I think are keys for the Steelers to get going. It's not going to be against Sauce. Sure, George is good too. You might get some, but that's not going to be where you can live as an offense. Right. I think they can throw the ball and get Freiermuth and Calvin Austin going. That'll go a long way. I think they need to run with Najee Harris just enough to at least get the play action going. This Jets defense has really struggled against the run. I know the Steelers are banged up on the offensive line. It honestly feels like with Zach Frazier out, Quinnen Williams is the best player on this New York Jets defense right there in the middle. Maybe a bigger Jalen Warren game. Do a little bit more outside running. I know he's coming back from that knee. Didn't really look like he was 100% last year. I might try to go a little bit more Jalen Warren in this one, see if they can balance out that rushing attack a little bit. On defense, man, this is such a good collection of players. And you wonder, how are they not better than they've been with Aaron Rodgers, Wilson, Alan Lazard, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen. Now you add Devontae Adams to the mix. And then you realize, well, that's why they fired their coach, because their players weren't playing as well as good as they should be. I think it's up to the Steelers defense just to keep them from getting on a roll. You can't let them get comfortable. They're a really talented offense. They've been struggling for a long time. They scored 9 points in a loss to the Denver Broncos. You have to keep them down as a defense. I think that's going to be hard to do, but I think that's the goal. That's the task at hand. Getting Alex Highsmith back will be huge in that regard.
Yeah, and I was just about to ask you about Alex Highsmith's return. So he's practically good to go. He said he feels no pain no more in his groin. So how do you think that will impact TJ Watt's, performance this Sunday, as he is getting his Robin to his Batman back in Alex Highsmith? And not only that, but would it allow Patrick Queen to get back to his normal routine of just neutralizing the middle?
Yeah, I think Alex Highsmith goes a long way to, making teams pay for spending way too much attention on TJ Watt. I don't know that they had the guys in there with respect to, Jeremiah Moon and Ade Ogundeji. I don't think those are guys that are going to make you pay for putting two guys on TJ Watt like the Raiders did all game last game. And of course, TJ still found a way to wreck shop with the 2 forced fumbles, even though he was getting double teamed all afternoon. I think this game, the interesting thing to me is the Jets are going to probably want to throw the ball, right? They just got Devontae Adams. That's the new shiny toy. They got a really nice 3 wide receiver set that I think matches up pretty well against the Steelers secondary. I think they're going to want to throw the ball, but I don't know how they protect Aaron Rodgers with 3 wide receivers on the field. So I don't know how they're going to do that. I think getting Alex Highsmith back will be huge, and maybe the Steelers can get the old guy running around a little bit. That's not exactly where his specialty lies.
All right. So before I let you go, just one more question. Jets at Steelers, Acrisure Stadium, Sunday Night Football. Win or loss, W or L for the Steelers?
I've been wrestling with this. I'm not really sure. I think this is a bad matchup for the Steelers. I think Aaron Rodgers can do a lot of the same things that Joe Flacco did to their defense. I'm not sure I really love Beanie Bishop against Alan Lazard. But like the Steelers are so good at home in primetime. They never lost with their throwback uniforms on. I think this is going to be an ugly game. I think the Steelers somehow find a way to win it. Something like 13-12. You know
what? You just took every word out of my mouth, because that's what I'm like. I'm like, it's time for me to flip a coin, but obviously, Steelers need this win. This is a conference game. You're battling for first place in the North. So I'm just hopeful that Russell Wilson could be even close to the guy that he was either in Seattle or his last days in Denver. But huge matchups for the AFC North: Browns at Bengals, Ravens at Bucks, or the Bucks at the Ravens. Either way, they're going to be in the juggernaut, either stadium they're at, and then the Steelers are at home the night before against the Jets. So, Alan, once again, I would love to thank you for joining this show on a last-minute notice. I promise it will be better next time I bring you on. That's all I have for you. You guys, if you're not already, please follow Alan on X, which is formerly known as Twitter, at Alan Saunders. And please follow PG Sports Now on Twitter as well for more coverage on your fellow Pittsburgh Steelers and other teams in Pittsburgh's media. Alan, once again, have a wonderful night. Thank you for joining. This is your host, Shay, signing out, and this is the live version of the Shaemac Show.
Get ready, let's go! Go hard, go home. can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. They can't stop you.